She hired him to build a bookshelf, but she didn't expect to open up her heart. He was young, she was a grieving widow, and neither of them was looking for anything until they found healing in each other. This is not just a love story, it's a second chance. Jake Morgan parked his pickup truck in front of a weathered yet elegant two-story home nestled at the edge of a quiet tree-lined street, the kind of place where time felt slower, as if the house and the trees had struck an agreement not to rush anything. He stepped out, toolbox in hand, wiping a smudge of sawdust from his flannel sleeve. His boots crunched on the gravel path as he approached the door. The work order said bookshelf installation, but the client had sounded hesitant on the phone, soft-spoken, reserved. Still, it was good work, and he needed the paycheck. Small jobs like this paid the rent while he slowly built a name for himself. Before he could knock, the door opened. "You must be Jake." Her voice was low, composed, not cold, just quiet. Jake nodded. "Yes, ma'am." She stepped aside. "Come in." I cleared the space in the living room. "Let me know if you need anything." She was beautiful, not in the obvious, glamorous way, but in the way of someone who'd once known love and sorrow intimately. Her eyes were a clear, startling green, set against soft lines at the corners. She looked to be in her mid-40s with long, dark hair loosely pulled back. She wore a plain sweater, jeans, and no makeup. Still, there was something striking about her, something unfinished and private. Jake stepped inside, nodding politely. "Thank you. Shouldn't take more than a couple of hours. I'm Clara, by the way," she added, almost as an afterthought. "Jake," he replied, even though she already knew. He glanced around. The house was warm, lived in, filled with a kind of quiet intentionality. Bookshelves framed art vases without flowers. She pointed toward the far wall. "I'd like it over there." "The old one?" "Well, it's gone now." He didn't press. He never did. "Got it." As he measured the space and laid out his tools, Clara disappeared into the kitchen, leaving him alone with the soft tick of a nearby wall clock and the faint scent of something herbal, maybe chamomile. The project was simple, a sturdy oak bookshelf, 6 feet tall with adjustable shelves. Clara had ordered it online and needed it assembled and mounted to the wall. He moved efficiently, methodically, the way he always did, cutting, aligning, sanding edges smooth. It kept his hands busy and his mind quiet. Halfway through, Clara returned and offered a mug of tea without a word. Jake looked up, surprised. "Thank you." She nodded, then lingered, watching him work. He wasn't used to being watched, not like this, without judgment, without small talk, just present. "You're good with your hands," she said softly. Jake chuckled under his breath. "Comes from growing up fixing what we couldn't afford to replace." She smiled faintly, and then after a beat said, "My husband built the old bookshelf." Jake froze for a second, not in awkwardness, but in respect. He looked up at her gently. She looked away. He passed. An aneurysm. Sudden. One minute we were making coffee together, and the next, she stopped. "He built it the first year we were married. It was crooked, too shallow, and tilted a little to the left, but I loved it. I told myself I wasn't ready to let it go, but I finally did." Jake didn't say anything. He didn't need to. Clara took a sip from her own cup and sat down in the armchair across the room. Funny how something as simple as a bookshelf can hold so much. He nodded. Not just wood and nails, I guess. They sat in companionable silence for a while, Jake working, Clara quietly watching. Outside, clouds rolled in, muting the light through the window. It wasn't the kind of silence that pressed on you. It felt spacious, safe. Jake had worked in dozens of houses, some filled with loud TV sets, kids screaming, impatient clients tapping at their phones. But this house felt different. It held memories gently. As he worked, Jake occasionally glanced over at Clara. She was sketching in a worn leather-bound notebook, her foot tapping softly. She had the air of someone who had lived through a story she rarely told, but it was there in the shape of her hands, the stillness in her shoulders. After a while, he said, "You sketch?" She looked up, a little startled. "I used to draw a lot before things shifted." He nodded. "Looks good from here." That earned a soft laugh. Flattery from the bookshelf guy. High praise. He smiled but didn't reply. She didn't mean it cruelly. It felt more like curiosity. When the shelf was finally upright, anchored securely to the wall, Jake stepped back. There it was, solid, level, no tilt. Clara stood walking slowly toward it. She ran her fingers along the edge, tracing the grain of the wood. Her eyes glistened, but she didn't cry. It's beautiful, she said quietly. Jake cleared his throat. Glad you like it. She turned to face him. Would you like to stay for dinner? It's just pasta, she added quickly. You don't have to. It's just, I haven't cooked for someone in a long time. Jake hesitated. He wasn't used to clients inviting him to stay. He wasn't used to anyone inviting him to stay. But something about the way she asked gently without expectation made it feel less like a favor and more like company. He nodded. Sure, that would be nice. Dinner was simple penne with tomato basil sauce, crusty bread, and a bottle of red wine she opened with practiced hands. They sat at the small table near the kitchen window. Outside, rain began to fall. You live around here, she asked. Couple towns over. Been here a while. Always been a handyman. Jake shrugged. Kind of fell into it. Grew up fixing things. My foster dad used to say, if your hands aren't busy, your head gets too loud. She tilted her head. Foster dad? Jake nodded. Bounced around the system, a few homes. He was the last one. Taught me carpentry, wiring, plumbing. Saved my life, probably. Clara studied him with that quiet gaze again. Not pitying, not romantic, just seeing. You're good at what you do, she said. That bookshelf feels like something more than just furniture. Jake looked at her, then down at his plate. Thanks, means a lot. They talked more, nothing dramatic, just slow revelations. She told him about the years she spent writing greeting cards for a living, about the dog she used to have, about how quiet the nights could feel in a big house like this. He told her about the jobs he took to town before this one, the pickup truck that was mostly rust and stubbornness. And when the rain deepened outside and thunder rolled low in the distance, neither of them moved to end the night. Eventually she stood. Let me show you something. She led him back to the living room and pulled a box from the bottom of another bookshelf. Inside were yellowed sketches, small wooden carvings, and a photo. Her husband, broad-shouldered with a grin that looked familiar in a way Jake couldn't place. He used to sketch with me, and he built things, she said. Terrible at measuring, but he loved the process. Jake looked down at the photo. You miss him. I do, she said softly. But tonight I didn't. Jake looked up. I didn't miss him the way I usually do, she clarified. Tonight felt different. He didn't know what to say, but she didn't need a reply. She gently closed the box and returned it to its spot. Then with a smile that held something warm and tentative, she said, you can come back if you want. There's a coat rack I've been meaning to replace. Jake smiled, happy to, and as he walked back into the rain toolbox in hand, he realized something. It wasn't just about the work anymore. Something had shifted, and maybe, just maybe, she wasn't the only one ready for a second chapter. The next time Jake pulled into Clara Whitmore's driveway, the morning light painted her house in soft golden tones. The weather had cleared since his last visit, but the tension he carried felt just as heavy. After their unexpected moment, the one where Clara had opened up about her late husband and stood a little too close to him in that echoing hallway, Jake hadn't been able to stop thinking about her. Not in a lustful way exactly, but more like a deep ache of understanding, a desire to keep being that safe place she clearly didn't have anymore. He knocked twice out of habit, even though she'd already told him to just come in. When she opened the door, Clara was in a loose cream sweater that fell slightly off one shoulder and a pair of worn jeans. Her long brown hair was pulled up loosely, strands escaping around her face. She looked like someone who'd cried the night before but still greeted the morning. Hey, she said softly. Hey, Jake replied, giving her a small smile. Brought everything I need. Today's the big anchor day, going to bolt that baby to the studs, so it doesn't go anywhere. Clara smiled faintly. Let's hope I don't either. Jake looked at her for a beat too long, then followed her inside. The work was slower today, more careful. Clara hovered a little more, offering coffee, then tea, then banana bread she claimed was old and dry. But Jake happily ate every bite. There was something different in the air between them, an unspoken invitation, a comfort they didn't quite know how to name. You said your husband built the last one, Jake said gently, as he measured and marked drill points. Was it similar to this one? Clara stood with her hands in her back pockets looking at the wall. It was rougher, not perfect, but I loved it. He built it the winter we moved in. We had boxes of books we'd collected, his especially, and we didn't want to keep them in storage anymore. Jake set down the pencil and looked over. He sounds like he was a builder too. She nodded. Of a lot of things. He built our garden beds, the trellis out back. He built a life with me even when I didn't know how to build one myself. Jake didn't answer right away. He watched her eyes soften and cloud. He sounds like he was lucky, he said finally. Clara looked up. Why is that? Because he had someone who remembers the things he built. That's not nothing. Their eyes met for a moment too long again. Then Jake cleared his throat and knelt to begin drilling. By lunchtime, they'd fallen into a rhythm. Clara brought sandwiches and they ate on the floor, legs crossed, surrounded by tools and wooden boards. It felt like something from a simpler time, before cell phones, before grief. Can I ask you something? Clara said as she folded the crust of her sandwich into a napkin. Sure, you said you were in foster care. Did you ever find people who stuck? Jake's throat tightened. Not many, he admitted. Some tried. I was a bit of a runner, thought leaving first meant I was in control. That sounds familiar, Clara whispered. Jake looked at her. Did you leave? She shook her head slowly. No, but my daughter did. He paused, sandwich halfway to his mouth. She left after the funeral. Clara continued. She blamed me. I blamed myself. There was a fight, harsh words, and then silence. Total silence. Jake swallowed hard. I'm sorry, I thought she'd come back, but it's been too long. I don't know if she ever will. Jake set his sandwich down. People come back sometimes, just not the way you expect. Clara looked at him with eyes full of something new, hope laced with fear. Have you ever gone back? She asked. Jake hesitated, once to say goodbye to someone who passed. I didn't expect anyone to remember me, but one old foster dad did. He told me something I still think about. What was that? Jake's jaw tightened. You weren't as invisible as you thought. The room went quiet again. The heater kicked on in the background, but neither of them moved. By late afternoon, the bookshelf was fully assembled, anchored, and level. Jake stood back, hands on hips, admiring his work. Clara stood beside him, arms crossed gently across her chest. It's beautiful, she said. It's yours, Jake replied. But they both knew it meant more than wood and nails. Clara reached out and ran her fingers over the smooth oak shelf. Would you help me put some of the books on? I haven't opened the boxes in years. Jake nodded. Of course. Together, they brought the old moving box from the hall closet. Clara opened them slowly, reverently, like they were boxes of memory instead of paperbacks. Some were dusty bestsellers, others dog-eared classics. A few had her husband's name on the inside cover in tidy cursive. Jake handed her one of the books. This one's seen some love. She smiled. He reread The Old Man and the Sea every winter. Jake chuckled. I read it once in high school. Didn't get it then. You might now, Clara said gently. They shelved books in comfortable silence, occasionally pausing when a memory surfaced. Clara, sharing a snippet about a camping trip, a snow day, a Christmas morning. Jake listened, grounding her in the present with his quiet presence. And then came the photo tucked between two hardcovers, a faded photo of Clara and her husband, arms around each other, their daughter between them, smiling, gap-toothed and radiant. Jake looked at the little girl. That's her. Clara nodded, lip trembling. Sophia. She used to sit right here and read for hours. She had his brain, my temper. Jake smiled softly. Sounds like a good combination. She was always asking questions. One time she asked why there weren't any stories about moms who made mistakes. I didn't know what to say. Jake met her eyes. Maybe this one's hers. Clara swallowed hard. You think so? Jake nodded. Stories change depending on who tells them. Maybe this is a new chapter. The photo stayed on the shelf. That evening, Jake packed up his tools and headed for the door. Clara walked him out, standing on the porch as the sun dipped low behind the trees. Thank you, Jake, she said, her voice low. For what? For more than the bookshelf. He gave her a small nod. Thank you for trusting me. She leaned in and hugged him, not long, not desperate, just enough. As Jake walked to his truck, he turned once more. Clara was still there, arms folded, hair catching the light, watching him not just with her eyes, but with something more. For the first time in a long while, Jake Morgan didn't feel like a stranger. He felt remembered. The call came after Jake finished Clara's bookshelf. It wasn't about another project. She didn't need help moving furniture or fixing a leaky faucet. Her voice on the phone was soft and unsure, like she was still debating if she should have called at all. Hey, Jake, I was just... I was wondering if you might want to come by sometime for coffee or lunch or, I don't know, something normal. He didn't even hesitate. Yeah, I'd like that. So on a quiet morning, he returned not as a handyman this time, but as something harder to define, a friend maybe, or just someone who had become part of her house's story. Clara greeted him at the door in a dark green cardigan and jeans, her bare feet padding softly on the hardwood floor as she led him inside. The air smelled like cinnamon and something baking. I made apple crisp, she said over her shoulder. Jake smiled. Guess I came on the right day. He followed her to the kitchen where sunlight streamed through the window above the sink, painting gold over everything. The home looked a little warmer now, less museum, more memory. There was music playing softly, Billie Holiday, he realized, and two mugs sat on the counter already filled. As they ate, Clara asked about his work, and Jake told her about a client who wanted a gazebo but didn't have a backyard. She laughed, really laughed, for the first time since they'd met. I'm starting to think people just want someone to listen, Jake said, half joking. You might be right, Clara replied, setting her fork down. And sometimes we pay them to stay because we're afraid no one else will. Jake looked at her. Is that what you did with me? She held his gaze. At first, maybe. Silence stretched between them, but it wasn't uncomfortable. Then Clara stood, walked to the living room, and returned with a small, unopened envelope. I found this, she said, placing it between them. It's from my daughter, postmarked a while ago. I must have missed it. Jake stared at the envelope. Her hands trembled slightly. I haven't opened it, Clara whispered. I didn't know if I could. Jake met her eyes. Do you want to now? She looked down. Only if you stay. He reached across the table and gently touched her hand. I'm not going anywhere. Clara opened the envelope with slow, deliberate care. Inside was a single sheet of lined paper folded neatly. Dear Mom, Clara, I know it's been a long time. I'm still angry sometimes, but not like before. I miss you. I miss Dad. I miss the smell of the house and the sound of the floorboards when you walk past my room. I don't know what comes next, but I wanted you to know I'm okay, and I hope you are too. Maybe one day I'll come home. Love, Sophia. Clara didn't speak for a long time. Jake let the silence stretch, let it be whatever she needed. Finally, she exhaled. She's alive. She still thinks of this as home. Jake nodded. That's something. Clara looked up at him, tears in her eyes. I didn't think I'd get even that. They sat outside on the porch after that, watching the early autumn leaves stir in the breeze. Clara pulled her cardigan tighter. Jake sat beside her elbows, resting on his knees. I used to think grief was something you had to fix, Clara said softly, like a hole in the roof. Patch it up. Move on. Jake glanced at her. And now I think it's more like a room you live in. Sometimes you clean it up, sometimes you don't, but it's always there. Jake nodded. That makes sense. What about you? She asked after a moment. Do you have a room like that? He smiled faintly. A whole floor. She looked at him. You never talk about your past, not much to say, bounced around homes, never really had a place that felt mine, until I started building things. At least wood doesn't walk away. Clara tilted her head. But people aren't wood. No. Jake said, his voice lower now. They're not. She studied him for a while. You're a good man, Jake. He looked away, embarrassed. You don't know me that well. I know enough, she said gently. You listen. You show up. You make space. That's more than most. Their eyes met, and for a moment Jake saw something in hers that hadn't been there before. Something fragile but alive. Hope. Later, Claire invited Jake back again. This time she didn't bake anything or set the table with extra care. She just called and asked if he wanted to help her plant bulbs in the backyard. He said yes, of course. The backyard was small but tidy, them flower beds running along the fence. Clara knelt in the soil with gloves and a trowel, and Jake knelt beside her and handing her bulbs and pulling weeds when she pointed them out. My husband hated tulips, she said, laughing. Jake looked at her. So you're planting them out of spite, out of survival, she said, smiling. It's time this garden became mine again. They worked in comfortable silence, the kind that grows between people who've stopped pretending. I keep wondering what Sophia would think if she came back, Clara said softly, if she'd even recognize me. Jake pressed a bulb into the earth. Maybe you're not the one who needs to be recognized, he said. Maybe she just needs to know there's still love here. Clara sat back on her heels, brushing dirt from her gloves. What about you? You ever want to build something for yourself instead of everyone else? Jake looked out at the yard. Sometimes I think I'm afraid to. Why? He met her eyes. Because I don't know what it's supposed to look like. Clara reached out, brushing soil from his cheek like it was second nature. Maybe you don't need to know yet. Maybe you just need to believe it's possible. His breath caught slightly at her touch, but he didn't move, and neither did she. By the time fall settled in, fully Jake was stopping by Clara's place almost every weekend. Sometimes they worked on little projects, fixing a squeaky cabinet, sanding an old bench. Sometimes they didn't work at all. They talked, they laughed more. Clara cried less. And one day Clara came out to the porch with 2 mugs and a letter in her hand. She wrote again, she said, offering the mug to Jake. Sophia, she wants to come by just for a visit. Jake's heart swelled. That's amazing, Clara. She nodded, but her fingers were trembling. I don't know if I'm ready, she whispered. What if it's awful? What if she's different? Jake gently took the letter from her. She probably is different. So are you. That doesn't mean it has to be awful. Clara closed her eyes. What if she asks why I let her go? Jake reached for her hand. Then you tell her you've been building a bookshelf ever since. Clara laughed, choked by a sob. You really think she'll understand? I think she'll see how much you've changed, he said quietly, and how much you've waited. Then he paused. And I'll be here, if you want me. Clara looked up. I do. They sat on the porch as the sky faded into dusk. Hands still joined coffee growing cold in their laps. When Sophia finally did come, tall, uncertain eyes so much like her mother's, Jake wasn't there. He'd deliberately given them space, though it nearly tore him apart not to be nearby. He waited to hear from Clara, uncertain if he should call. But that night, just as he was locking up his truck, he got a text. She came. She stayed for tea. We cried. We laughed. It wasn't perfect, but it was something. Thank you, Jake. Then a second message. Are you free tomorrow morning? I want to show you the new tulips. Jake grinned. He replied, wouldn't miss it. And for the first time in both their lives, the next chapter didn't feel so uncertain. It felt wide open. Jake and Clara's story illuminates a profound lesson. Healing often comes through quiet presence and shared vulnerability. Clara, a widow clinging to memories of her late husband's crooked bookshelf, and Jake, a young handyman shaped by a transient past, found solace in each other's company. Their connection, forged over pasta books and honest silences, shows that second chances arise when we allow others to see our scars. Clara's courage to replace her husband's bookshelf and open her daughter's letter with Jake's steady support teaches us that grief is not a hole to patch, but a room to live in enriched by new love and hope. Jake's choice to stay despite their age gap, and Clara's fears reminds us that true connection transcends differences when built on mutual respect. In a world quick to move past pain, this story urges us to linger, to listen, and to build spaces where others feel remembered. Clara's reconnection with Sophia and Jake's newfound sense of belonging inspire us to embrace life's imperfections and plant new roots. Have you ever found healing through an unexpected bond or helped someone rebuild their story? Share your experience in the comments. I'd love to hear it. If this resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon to join our community of storytellers. Let's keep crafting moments that make life's chapters feel wide open.